Those of you who follow my channel are probably aware that I have now completed recitation on an unabridged basis of the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, which is contained in Ch'an and Zen Teaching, the third volume of this wonderful series that was put together by Charles Luck, who was the translator. And the commentator from the long ago past on this particular sutra was the Chan master Shan. And I want to read some of his commentary and also maybe the first one or two little segments of the sutra to give a sense of how and why the Buddhas create pure lands on behalf of us suffering sentient beings. Shan says, when the Dharmakaya transmigrates through the five worlds of existence, and let me just stop and give some of the footnotes here. I think most of you are aware that the Dharmakaya is the Buddha body that is not describable with any words or concepts. It is from the Dharmakaya that emanates the Sambhogakaya, or the bliss bodies, which are the cosmic Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as well as the Nirmanakayas, or the Buddhas that manifest themselves in physical form to teach us human beings in a more direct, concrete way. And of course, the five worlds of existence are the world of the gods and titans, the world of men, of animals, of hungry ghosts, and of hells, which is kind of a classic Buddhist breakdown of really the various conditions that we can find ourselves in terms of our mental states as human beings. So he says, when the Dharmakaya transmigrates through the five worlds of existence, it is called a living being. So the Dharmakaya apparently manifests itself or transmigrates into the form of living beings. Therefore, the ultimate stage of pure and clean enlightenment attained by a living being is, in fact, the self-moving cause ground of all Buddhas. Now, the self-moving cause ground is the fundamental self-nature which, by means of self-cultivation, leads to the fruit ground or effect ground, that is, the stage of Buddhahood. So this perhaps relates to the notion within Buddhism that we are very fortunate to have been born as a human being, and more fortunate still to have been exposed to the Dharma, and even more so to have been exposed to such a wonderful sutra as this. But the point being that it is in the form of a living being, us in a sense being an emanation from the Dharmakaya, that we are able to manifest our self-nature through our cultivation in some form of practice or other within the various Buddhist traditions to become Buddhas. Okay? So it says, the Dharmakaya manifests itself in all our daily activities, but is imperceptible because it is screened by our ignorance. And of course, ignorance again is one of the three poisons: greed, hatred, and ignorance or delusion. And so this is why Shan says, the world-honored one took the trouble to appear in the three realms in response to the needs of people of different potentialities, to point out that every person fundamentally possesses the Buddha nature. And this is one of the key teachings, as I understand it, within Mahayana Buddhism, is that we all have the Buddha nature. We all have the potential to experience prajna, or wisdom. We all have the capability of becoming a Buddha. I should say more the potentiality rather than the capability, because again, sometimes that screen of ignorance is so thick that it's a rough road to be able to make that transition. And as he acknowledges here, he says, because all living beings have been deluded for so long with their ever-growing ignorance thickening its veil, their delusion can be destroyed only by means of meditative insight. For this reason, the threefold method of profound meditation was set up as essential to their awakening. Now, I'm no expert in various kinds of meditation, but I will indicate from the notes here that this apparently is a meditation system that developed within the Ten Chai school of Buddhism in China, where there are three kinds of meditation to eradicate delusion, namely insight into the immaterial, into the phenomenal, and into the mean. So the mind that discriminates is immaterial and is therefore void. All phenomena are its creation and are therefore false. And both mind and phenomena are not a duality, but one, hence the mean that includes both. And we come back over and over again to this notion of non-duality, which I've emphasized in other videos means neither dual nor non-dual. So in any case, the master says, it is due to dull human potentiality, which is not qualified for perfect self-cultivation, that during his lifetime the Buddha was obliged to expound first the meditative study of all as void, to eliminate the troubles caused by human views and desires, and then that of all as unreal, to wipe out illusions as countless as dust and sand, and finally that of the mean, which is inclusive of both, to eradicate ignorance. In a way, we know how in the Prajnaparamita Sutras the emphasis is on emptiness, or the void. But what we also find, I think, in the Prajnaparamita Sutras is that we are advised by the Buddha not to get hung up on emptiness. Emptiness itself can become a concept that represents a kind of dualism. And so, form is void and void is form. Emptiness is the same as form and form is the same as emptiness. So Han-Chan says, this incomparable Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, which is concise and essential, as well as emphatic and requisite, is the unsurpassed Dharma door to self-realization. Again, speaking of this particular sutra, he says, it inquires exhaustively into all falsehoods and strips the mind of all obstructing thoughts. Its subtle method of realization of the self-mind and straight leap into reality is the real sutra in the Dharma Dhatu and the unexcelled line of conduct leading to the attainment of Buddhahood, which will be as easily reachable as fruit held in the hand by means of instantaneous awakening and experiencing. It reveals the deep and secret meaning of Bodhidharma's direct pointing and thus exposes all without hiding anything. So we'll recall that Bodhidharma was a tremendously important patriarch within the Zen tradition who, as I recall, supposedly brought Buddhism from India to China and talked about direct pointing at the mind of man as being the methodology as opposed to reliance upon words and letters. Well, that said, these are some wonderful words and letters within this Sutra of Complete Enlightenment. As Han-Chan says, all students of the Buddha's teaching use this sutra as their guiding compass. Now, when Han-Chan gets into the actual commentary on the sutra itself, he makes the point that the two words complete enlightenment directly point at the one mind, and that's with capital O and capital M, which is the substance of this Dharma. Complete enlightenment is also called great, complete, and full enlightenment, profound awareness of the enlightened mind, the Dharma realm of one reality, and the pure and clean true mind of the Tathagata Garbha. And the Tathagata Garbha, again, I think, is that womb of the Tathagata where resides within us the potential for Buddhahood. Although its names are many, it is only the profound mind of complete enlightenment, and it is only this one mind which is the fundamental cause and effect on which depend the enlightenment of the saintly and delusion of the worldly in the 10 Dharma Dhatus. It is the main source of all Buddhas and is called the Dharmakaya. It is the mind ground of living beings and is therefore called Buddha nature. So, leading up to the text of the sutra itself, he says, "This sutra teaches instantaneous awakening of the one mind. There are no progressive stages." Now to the sutra itself, it begins, "Thus have I heard. Once the Bhagavan was enjoying samadhi correctly in the great supernatural effulgent storehouse, which was the bright and glorious resting place upheld by all Tathagatas, and also the pure and clean enlightened stage attainable by all living beings." And Shan notes that this is the place where this sutra was expounded. The Buddha has three bodies: the Dharmakaya, or essential body, the Sambhogakaya, or reward body, and the Nirmanakaya, or transformation body. These bodies have three corresponding lands or regions: the still and illuminating land of the Dharmakaya Buddha, the glorious reward land, which is the lotus treasury where the Sambhogakaya Buddha resides, and where bodhisattvas who have realized their immaterial bodies expounded the Avatamsaka Sutra, and the incomplete expedient land where the Nirmanakaya Buddha, or Sakyamuni Buddha, expounded the three vehicles to men and gods on the Vulture Peak at Shravasti and in other places. Going on now with further comments on that first passage, he says, "The great supernatural effulgent storehouse is the calm and illuminating land of the Dharmakaya. The bright and glorious resting place upheld by all Tathagatas is the eternally calm and illuminating land realized by all Buddhas. It is the resting place of the Buddha in his Dharmakaya. It is the land of reality." Now, going to the second verse, which is really what I wanted to put a focus on in this particular video, the sutra says, "This is where both body and mind are in a state of calmness and extinction of passions. The fundamental region is universal. The function is complete and all-embracing, and non-duality prevails. From this undivided land, he caused all pure lands to appear." So Shan comments, "Where there is no duality, all the saintly and the worldly return to the oneness of universality. Non-duality is the state in which all Buddhas enjoy Dharma bliss. There is no division between expounder and listeners. It follows that there is also no speaking and teaching, and there is complete absence of expounding the Dharma. As said in the text, from this non-dual condition, the Buddha caused all pure lands to appear, so as to turn the actual land where the Buddha was enjoying his own practice of Dharma to that where the spiritual benefit of others was possible." So here we have in explicit terms in this sutra an articulation in generic terms, as opposed to more specific terms, such as in the Sukhavati Sutra, where Dharmakaya Bodhisattva becomes a Amida Buddha and creates his pure land in the West. Various Buddhas create various pure lands, and here we have the dynamics associated with that process. Buddhas create pure lands to help sentient beings transcend their delusions and find peace and rest and comfort. That's what happens in the teaching of Buddhism. It's not to dwell in sunyata or the void or emptiness. It's to come back to the world and recognize true non-duality, which is again, as Shan says, the Buddha causing all pure lands to appear so as to turn the actual land where the Buddha was enjoying his own practice of Dharma, which is his Dharmakaya, to that land where the spiritual benefit of others was possible, which can only be a land that we can conceptualize and appreciate, even in the context of our illusions or delusions. So to finalize these comments on the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, Shan says, "This sutra is a sermon delivered by the Tathagata in his Dharmakaya. No other sutra can equal it. The Lankavatara Sutra is the sermon delivered by the Dharmakaya to bear witness to the Buddha by means of his Dharma, whereas the present sutra serves to bear witness to him by means of his land. So in just these first two verses, we have such profound and comforting teachings provided by the Buddha, who helps us understand with facilitating commentary by this Chan master, Shan, how the pure lands are created for our benefit as living beings. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots.